Yep. Okay. Good morning, guys, to you in the room and to everyone virtually with us. Very nice to be here at the conference, especially in person. And hope everyone can hear me okay and can see my screen okay. Please post to the chat if you can't. So this is to cover off modernization on the IBM I, right? A really big topic going through most of our businesses. We're going to touch on a few of the areas today. I'd like this to be as interactive as possible. I know it's a little challenging with some people in the room and some remotely, but feel free to interject at any point. I think it's good to make sure that this is an interactive session. I was told by a professor when the COVID situation started and we all got locked down that talking to people for more than 7 minutes in a row without any feedback is a terrible idea. So I'll try not to. Like I say, please interject. So that's me. I'm Karl Haggart, the managing director for Remain Software in the USA. I'm based in Southern California and delighted to be here in Austin this week. I've been in the IBM I, AS400, System 38 ecosystem since the 80s. Been very active in the community over the years, starting back in the Partners in Development days, right, in Belgium. I'm currently a member of the Common Americas Advisory Council, so work closely with IBM. If you guys submit RFEs back to IBM, that comes through the Advisory Council. So would encourage you to do that and make most use of the community. So like I said, I've been in the environment since the 80s. I've worked in banking and manufacturing, in farming, and in Europe, in the US, in Asia. So the platform, as you guys all know, has been around forever in various guises. And what we're looking at now is some of that technical debt, right? The legacy we've left behind over the years. So just before I jump into the session, a little about Remain. We're a Dutch company, headquarters in Utrecht, in the Netherlands. Been around for almost 30 years now. A very IBM-centric shop. We work in the DevOps space, so change management, CI/CD, automated testing, right? All of those cool things that the guys on other platforms take for granted. But maybe we in the IBM I world have been left behind a little. But it's all possible on the IBM I, right? So just for those of you who are here in person, obviously there was a big F1 race this weekend here in Austin. So I'm English, even though I'm based in the US now. So a big Lewis Hamilton fan, and obviously my company's Dutch. So they were all cheering for Max. So my boss and the rest of my colleagues in the Netherlands were all very happy that Max won. But it was a great weekend. I think more than 400,000 people showed up over the weekend. It was a fabulous time. Thank you to John and Mark and the guys at CM First for organizing the event for us. So let's get started, right? I think before we sort of delve too much into the future, I think it's very important to spend a minute or so just thinking about where we came from, right? We for most of us, for our organizations, we started on an AS400 or a System 38 or some derivative of that, maybe even back on the 36, right? So we've got 30 years, maybe more, of building very large, very complex business applications. We maybe started on RPG2, RPG3, right? We've got Synon in there, CA2E. We've got even maybe Obsidian back there. Back in the day, that was my first interaction with the Synon world, was Obsidian back in London. What seems like a lifetime ago, right? So we We got some. Did we hit an audio problem?
Is the audio working now?
It's back now.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, guys. Apologies, some technical difficulties today, which is always good at an IT conference, right? So let me just recap quickly, right? Our systems at that time, we had lots of end of day time normally, so we had downtime. We could make changes to our application. Our users didn't expect 24/7, right? 365, we were in that model. And for a lot of us, those very large monolithic programs, big systems are still sitting there running our business. But as we've gone through the last few years, right? We know we've started to do more. We've started to interact over the last 20 years with other systems. I'm sure most of you have heard some variant of this over the years, right? Sitting in your IT shop, typically from the .NET guys or maybe one of the Java guys. I can connect to anything in our IT platform apart from the AS400. It was a stone that we got thrown at a lot. It was never true, of course. What they really meant was I can connect to anything on Windows. But that was a typical thing, right? As we moved through into the client server world and we started looking at different technologies, our business apps started to become a little more distributed. I'm sure most of us have been in the world where Excel forms part of your business app stack, right? The users are constantly pulling data into Excel, modifying it, pushing it around. But as we've seen things change, right? We've got now multiple business apps. We don't just have our AS400 anymore. We've got stuff running everywhere, maybe even natively on your server, right? Zend did a great job with bringing PHP to the platform. So I know lots of people moved there. We've got Java and Ruby and .NET, and the open source guys have brought more and more packages to us, particularly over the last couple of years. But you've also got those languages and applications running on other platforms, right? Whether that's Windows or Linux, Unix. So things became more complicated, right? We've now got interdependencies between those applications. We've got more demand for access. And as we share data, we now have that need to make sure everything's keeping in sync. So if we sort of look at IT maybe 30 years ago, right, it was typically finance, and then we moved into maybe warehousing, manufacturing. Now it's everywhere, right? We've got our users expect to be able to pull up data on their cell phone. We've got tablets connected. Depending on your working environment, you've got forklifts connected. You've got all kinds of devices coming in, pulling data, pushing data. We're in the Internet of Things world, right? I spent time working for farming customers, connecting soil samplers back to our box to get how much water trees in a grove are pulling back, right? It's all possible now. Things that we didn't do 30 years ago for sure. So as we start to look at that, right, we've now got constant demand 24/7, right? We've got to think about making sure that that data is accurate, single version of the truth, and we're pushing it where we want it to go. If you think back to where we started with those big old RPG2 programs, big old RPG3 programs, none of this was thought about. But now we've still got them running, right? We've still got them sitting there, and we need to think about how we can make that data accessible everywhere through our organization. So, I think most of us can see that as we keep moving forward, right, our our apps are becoming much more focused. We're no longer looking at that one monolithic app to do everything. More focused, more distributed because of the focus, right? Languages, ever expanding because we need to pick the language that deals with the job best, right? No longer green screen, 8 colors, reverse image, doesn't cut it anymore, right? So we're seeing our IT footprint that we're all responsible for becoming ever more complicated, right? The interdependencies between these apps become more complicated, and as they do so, our ability to change needs to become quicker, right? We need to be more agile. We need to consider how we can get there from where we're coming from. So, like most things in IT, right? What do? Well, it depends. It really does depend on your footprint and what you're currently doing and how far through that journey you've got, right? Everyone's slightly different. Everyone's business scenario is slightly different. So really 4 things, right? Your current application stack, how your resourcing looks, what your business needs to do, and how your user community behaves. I think those are the 4 things that as we sit in IT and look at where we need to go, got to look where we're coming from, we've got to look who can help us, got to look what the business does, and we've got to look how our users work. So we start from the beginning, right? Our current application stack. For most of us, given the systems we grew up on and built on, we're normally running a system of record, right? This is normally our orders are there, our stock is there. These are the important records that keep running our business. Our financial information's all in there. Some of us have pushed that out, right? And we've got systems of engagement too. So we've got customer focused systems sitting out there that we've worked with. And the key thing of this, right? The key thing of what we've built, we've got that 30 years going. We've normally built things into our system that help our company differentiate themselves from our competition, right? We've picked those little nuggets up. They might be hidden in some monolithic sign-on system, right? They could be sitting in RPG3 somewhere down the line, but we've got things in our business application that we've either customized or built that help our business stand out. Maybe we've got a quicker way to ship than our competitors. Maybe we've got a better way to pack than our competitors, right? We've got something in there that helps us stand out. That's why the system's been running for so long. But the downside with that, obviously, it's hard to integrate, right? If we're running there with DDS sitting on our database, physicals, logicals, all the stuff that goes with that, with our sign-on model, it's hard to pull things out of there, hard to pull those rules out, and hard to make that integration with our mobile tech, with all of the new ways of working. And because it's hard, it becomes very difficult to keep up with business demand, right? Our users want things quickly and instantly. And sometimes with the technology stack we're working on, it's hard to do that. So it really does depend how much technical debt do you have, right? Are we using modern RPG? Have we started to move forward through all of these languages? Or are we still running something like it's an AS400, right? I've worked at plenty of places where our user community call it the AS400, even though you couldn't buy one for, I don't know, 30 years or more now. Our users still call it the AS400 because in some aspects, it still looks like an AS400. It's still a green screen. We've got reverse image on a few things, and we've got a printer file that produces a spool file and they print it out. Right? But some people are further down the path, right? Some people have taken advantage of PHP, Ruby, and started to move things forward. Is someone monitoring the chat in case?
Yeah, I'm watching.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I just realized I had it minimized. So, you know, in coming with all of this that's been said so far, right, with 30 years in, I'm sure all of us have sat there with our management, and there's a fear that our key resources are getting older, they're reaching retirement. We can't lose that knowledge, right? Our resources, I think most of us started off a while ago. We were the business analyst, we were the developer, we were the tester, right? The beauty of the 38 and the AS400 were that you were a full stack developer before it was cool to be a full stack developer, right? We did all of that fun stuff that now is vital. We built everything. So the knowledge typically sitting in your IT staff is vital to the business, right? These guys have been around years. They've seen the business grow. They are the ones who've put those little nuggets into our system that help us stand out from our competition. So we're a little fearful of losing AIT staff and coding knowledge, but also business knowledge. And then I'm sure we've all faced the recruitment problem, right? The kids coming out of school now don't want to work in RPG. They don't want to work on the green screen. They want to work on the cool new stuff. So we need to think about that as well, right? How are we going to keep our IT environment running going forward? We know we've got to bring new people in. Folks retire, folks move jobs, right? It becomes easier for that recruitment and training gig if you're not sitting there in old sign-on models of old RPG. And then moving on to the third one, really, we've got to look at our business, right? We made all of those changes, whether it was a package we bought and modernized or whether it's something we wrote from scratch and we've amended it over the years, right? Does it give you some competitive advantage sitting there in the marketplace? What's the differentiator in the system that you guys have all built and run that helps you go forward? If we could make it better, is there a possibility that maybe we can open new markets, right? If it's not a green screen, if we can put some cool front end on our app and we can make it accessible from tablets and mobiles, could we then make it run in a different language? Could we make our UI work in Spanish and open up the Latin American market, right? Are there things we can look at from a business potential that if our system was more flexible, could we move things forward? Could we help the business grow? So what do we need to do, right? Do we need to move platforms? Do we need to move application stacks? Well, again, right, the same answer as before. It depends, because it really does depend on everyone's individual scenario here. This is a comment that IBM used a while ago. It probably should say 15 years now, but right, the longer we sit and don't do it, the harder the job becomes. So if some of you started this journey 10, 15 years ago, you're in a much better position than if we're still sitting there looking at very old school stuff, right? For all of those reasons we just went through, our staff's getting older, harder to recruit, more code, more business risk. Right? So there's really two choices, right, going forward. Do you build it again, or do you go buy it? Or a combination, right? Lots of off-the-shelf solutions, as most of us know from the old AS400 days, right? A very active vendor community, lots of ERP, warehousing, financial solutions that are out there. Less vendors these days, so not so many choices. And I think the key thing, right, if you're gonna buy a package, it has to fit. If you're gonna build it, you need the resource. So you've got a double-edged sword, right? You can't buy something that doesn't work. I think we've all been in those places where the slick SAP or Oracle sales guy comes in and convinces your senior management that he does everything for you. And we all know what happens 5 years down the line after it doesn't do everything for you. So I think you need to think long and hard about whether there's a solution there that works. And again, something that, particularly on the IBM i, right, Jesse Godzinski and his team have done a great job of porting hundreds of open source solutions across, right? There are so many tools out there now that you can run natively, very easy to install, very easy to play with. There's a lot of things there that can go make your life much easier than it was 20 years ago when we didn't have all of those options. I think the other thing that often, in my experience, slows people down with this, right? This is not an IT project, right? We cannot be modernizing for the sake of modernization. It has to add some value to the business, right? We've got those systems with those little differentiators in there, and they helped our businesses grow. They helped us get to where we are as companies now. But there are also downsides to that, right? It's harder to adapt quickly. We've all got now much younger staff in our organization who take one look at those green screens and say, I can't work with that, right? We're now working with kids who grew up with Facebook and WhatsApp and Instagram, and our green screen and 8 colors doesn't cut it anymore. But that's not to discount the IT impact, right? We obviously want to do this to fix those IT issues we already talked about. An aging workforce, difficult to recruit, hard to react. But that has to be secondary to we're bringing value to the business, right? There are plenty of aspects of our businesses where running on a green screen is still perfectly okay, right? There are plenty of places where a screen with 2 fields on is all the user community needs. And speed is important, right? If you're sitting in a warehouse, you're driving a forklift, you want to scan a pallet and move it. 5250 telnet session is the quickest thing for that forklift driver. It doesn't have to be modernization for modernization's sake, right? The more footprint you put out there, the more bandwidth you start consuming, the slower things go. But we also know that we can't be giving those green screens to our outside of the company customers, right? They don't like that anymore. We've got to look at where we modernize and why we modernize. So as a couple of steps, right? One of the things that's hardest for us all in these monolithic systems is understanding what we have, right? We've got thousands and thousands of programs, thousands of tables, files in some cases as well. And I'm sure for most of us, if we did some detailed analysis of that code base we have, there's a whole bunch of stuff sitting out there that we maintain and we keep as overhead that hasn't been used in years, right? Our systems changed, but when you now go make a file change, all of those programs that haven't been executed by the user community in years still need to change. So before we go modernize everything, we need to go through and see what's used out there, what isn't used. There's a whole bunch of great analysis tools sitting out there, right, from various vendors that can help with this, that can go through and say, okay, how many times has this program been run? Where is it used? What does it touch? What's our path through? We need to get that so we can start to shape how big a project we have. And then once we're looking at that, right, we also need to value those artifacts. We need to understand whether, is this big Synon model part of the important part of our business, part of the vital part of our business, or is it a nice to have sitting on the side? The same with our RPG, right? If you're sitting there and you've got RPG or COBOL, big programs, what do they do? How much impact do they have on the business? And then sitting alongside that analysis of your IT artifacts, we need to understand the business model, right? And where the business is going. Just because 30 years ago we wrote order entry and Dave's been maintaining it for 30 years, doesn't mean that's still what the business want to do in order entry, right? If you walk around and talk to your business users, you'll often find that now there are fields on screen 2 that really would be cool if they were on screen 1. But the users put up with it because it's the way they've always worked, right? If we can alongside looking at our IT model, if we can look at the business model to understand what our business does and where it wants to go, then taking those two disparate parts and pulling them back together gives us that partnership between business and IT that allows us the opportunity to succeed. So, you know, there are a whole bunch of tools out there. If we're going down the build it path, right, we have to pick the right tool set. We don't have to write only in Synon. We don't have to write only in RPG, only in COBOL. Pick the best language for the job. And not just from a technical aspect as well, right? We've got to pick the best language for the job with a view to the future and recruitment and who we're going to get in our shop to work on this stuff, right? And we also need to give our development team members some tools to do their job, right? It's not, I know still there are lots of people sitting out there still working in SEU, right? IBM haven't modernized that for forever. We need to be using the right tools for the job. We need to give the developers the tools that they can work from both aspects, right? From their pure coding aspect, but then everything else that now fits into that development role, right? We need conversion tools out there. Again, we don't need to go read our Synon or our RPG or our COBOL. There's lots of tools sitting out there that can help us modernize, right? Good conversion tools can make this journey way, way shorter, right? Even if they're only getting 80 to 90% of your conversion done, that's an awful lot of grunt work and effort taken out of things. And as we start to modernize then, and we're looking at a more modern application footprint, all of the other things that sit in that DevOps world become available to us. You know, over the years, I think if I look at the IBM community compared to other development communities, we've traditionally done a pretty bad job at automated testing, right? The developer makes the change, the developer tests it. If we're lucky, we go through some version of UAT, but that's normally just a user typing in a few things and saying, yeah, it's good, and we move it to production. Then we find the data set condition in production that we didn't find in test, and we break a bunch of stuff, right? Automated testing is important to fit into this as well. It should be possible as the developer pushes his change from dev into test, that your automated testing tools run, that they check code coverage, right? Did all of the code I changed get executed? Because if it didn't, testing's pointless, right? We need to make sure that our code coverage is good. We need to have good test scripts, and we need to have a tool that as you make that change, it's automatically running so that the job of the dev manager or the QA guy is to look at those test results. We should, alongside that, be able to use some of the CI/CD tooling as well, right? We can run Jenkins on the eye. So if you're sitting there in a bigger shop where your Windows or Unix colleagues are all plugged into Jenkins or Bamboo, there is nothing stopping you doing that on the IBM i. Jenkins works perfectly well on the i. So we need to consider how the modern developer works with all of the tool set that's available. If we're sitting there running in a Java world, in a .NET world, in a Ruby world, we still have the ability to use that same tool set. And in giving your development team all of the modern tools that a full stack developer would expect to have, you're going to find it way easier to recruit, right? This is a modern way to work. This matches with everything. The language is just a language, right? It doesn't really matter what language you're writing it in, as long as it's the best one for the job. But all of the things that sit around it make for a happier development workforce, right? And I think just to touch on this again, right? This is key. It's not easy. I know, right? I've sat there with 30-year-old systems with that. How are we going to make this work in a foreign country in a different language? But It's never going to get easier, right? The problem only gets bigger as the business grows. You don't want to be the block stopping the business opportunity from coming. So again, right, we talked through before whether you build or buy. I think the hybrid application, and from IBM's point of view, that's really merging widely available open source style applications with things that you write that help you differentiate what your business does. Right? So maybe there are things that are out there that are pretty easy to port now, right? We can run lots of this stuff on your server, and even if it's running in a different partition, it becomes easy to link to. If we're still back with our monolithic old database, right? Making a database abstraction layer, starting to use some of the stuff that's out there in DB2 SQL can also make your life easier, right? Small steps, building things that are reusable are all vital to this journey. But also don't lose sight of the value and what's been built for 30 years, right? That application sitting there that everyone wants to modernize is normally key to the way your business has grown. Right? We don't want to throw that away. There's an awful lot of value there. The challenge is extracting that value, making it reusable, right? And again, just really look at what's out there from an open source standpoint. Folks who work on other platforms have been doing this forever, right? It's not that long ago that suggesting open source on an IBM I was not very popular in the IBM world, right? Now they've embraced it fully. And the number of apps grow and grow and grow that are available to us. And then lastly, right, DB2. DB2, we've seen some massive improvements from what the database team have given us, particularly in the SQL side, right? So many SQL services sitting out there that are easily accessible, that can drop your lines of code down so quickly because they've built things that'll help us. And I think one of the speakers in the roundtable mentioned this yesterday. I think this is really important, right? This is evolution, not revolution. We're not throwing everything away and starting from scratch. We've got to build this slowly, and that evolutionary journey, again, the sooner you start, the better it gets, right? So I think, as I touched on a few minutes ago, right, revolution, throw everything away, move to SAP, right? There are plenty of studies out there, a couple from Gartner and the Standish Group, right? Suggesting that more than 50% of these major development projects fail. And that suggestion of failure is not taking budget or timeline overruns, right? So to me, if I've got a project that's going to cost 5 million and take 2 years, if it costs 10 million and takes 4 years, that's a failure. But these guys are saying that if you consider that a success, that you're over budget and behind time, that's a success. Still more than half of the projects fail. So this revolutionary idea of throw it all away and start again is expensive, and you're really turning your business over to people who don't necessarily understand what it is you do. And again, we can't lose sight of the fact that this is a business task, right? It's not an IT task. IT helps our company run. It isn't what our end users do. And then just a little comment, right? There are studies everywhere. The guys from CM First have got a very good one published. IBM have one published. And I'm happy to share links if you guys have questions on these things, right? More than happy to share the links to them. There are numerous examples of failures in the US and Europe where large companies have bought an off-the-shelf package to do a very basic task, and it doesn't work. I think Bob yesterday was very bold, right? He shared in the round table that they took an option to go pick a payroll system because, hey, it's payroll. How can that not work?
Yeah.
So you go take a very easy example. You pick a plug and payroll system, plug it in, and it doesn't work. And but Bob was very brave to share that they looked at that and saw how long it was going to take, right? Weeks at every site, because we imagine everything's the same, and then you go dig into the weeds and find that this government regulation can't be met, the next one can't be met, there are some tax implications here. We have no way to pay people or not citizens, right? There's a million issues that you get. So even something as basic as a payroll system, which you would imagine is pretty standard, right? It can fail. And if it fails, A, you've spent an awful lot of money. B, you've got an awful lot of time wasted. And now you're back where you started with an unhappy user base, right? So evolution, instead of throwing it all away, right? Look at what you have. Let's see what we can value and what we can help to modernize. Because again, we've got a business application that help our business grow. And I think, I work for a tool manufacturer, right? So there are plenty of tools that help you. But I think it's very important to be honest and upfront. There is no unicorn out there, right? There's no magic tool that you can go buy that's suddenly going to take this 30-year-old system and do everything you want out of the box and in a couple of months give you perfection, right? There are lots of tools that all together can help you get there. And again, just to call out, right, I'm not discounting the package solution here. I think packages work great when they absolutely fit what you do as a business. But what you find an awful lot of the time, right, is the suggestion is it fits 80 to 90% of your business. And the solution from that package vendor is change your business to do what the package does.
Oh, yeah.
That can't be the way to go, right? Your business is the vital part of this. Taking those differentiators away to run in a package solution now puts you back with your competitors. Maybe that little thing that you could do that they couldn't, whether it's shipping a day quicker, fulfilling an order a few hours quicker, whatever it is, right? That's vital to your business. The packages do all of the basic stuff really easily. It's figuring out whether they do the important stuff. And then again, back to the tools, right? Pick the right one. I think we all know now that 5250 green screen is not the best user interface for all of our user community out there. And then again, right? Doing nothing. If we haven't done any of these steps for the last 15 years, that's why we have a challenge. And that challenge is only going to get worse, right? If we're not modernizing, if we're not moving forward, our workforce is just going to get older. It's going to be harder to recruit, harder to maintain the application stack, harder to keep up with business demand, right? And I think just important to call out as well, right? Lots of resources out there. The vendor community, our user group community, IBM, there's lots of stuff out there to help us. You guys are obviously, you're here, right? So that's a great start because we all know that there are those shops out there who have done no education in those 30 years as well. So being at these events, being at common events, being at the other community events out there, very important to learn what you can and can't do. Right? IBM have done an awesome job themselves over the last few years of making information available, right? Their websites are still a little challenging to navigate around, but there's an awful lot of information out there. And then don't be afraid to utilize the vendors, right? I would hope we're all working in the vendor community. We're looking out. We should be looking out for your best interest, right? So again, I know I overshot that 7 minutes of talking by a little, but I want to thank you for your time. If there are any questions, we're happy to chat through it. I think there were what, 6 of us in the room here. There's a bunch of people online. So happy to chat. Now I'll be around for the rest of the conference as well. If you'd like to talk more about any of this modernization stuff, if we'd like to touch on DevOps in any more detail, right? I know it's sort of the cool buzzword that's been bounced around a while, but really it's just your orchestration of those tools to cut down on manual work, right? It's what the guys in the rest of the IT community have taken for granted, and something that maybe we didn't use enough of in the IBMI world. So happy to share what we as Remain do, what other options are out there. And again, just from a generic IBMI standpoint, guys have got questions, feel free to ask, feel free to reach out during the conference. Is there anything there to cover?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Can I ask a question now?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, any success story by using tools to convert Synon to, say, Java? Anybody have that experience, good or bad?
I think we don't have John in the room right now, but
I mean, we're at CM First, we're converting Synon to Plex, and we're using converting it to Java in Plex, and we're having very good success right now with doing that. We've had several conversions over the last few years, and I mean, they're starting to go like clockwork. I mean, we can pretty much predict how long and how the success is, and there's always going to be some portions that have to be redone manually or something. We can pretty much predict what's going to go on along the way there. So it's getting pretty good, but it's Plex Java, so it's not Java that typical Java programmers are going to be reading and writing and so forth.
Right.
But again, it's one of those steps in the journey, right?
Yeah, yes, it is a step in the journey. And I mean, most people, still stay on the AS400 for their backend database, but they have the option down the road to convert to another database if that's what they want. So.
Yeah, we look at a path of Plex conversion, but our CIO or senior leadership doesn't want to use a 4GL. They decided to go for just open source completely. So we are moving to rewrite everything in Java. But it will be a very tough journey.
That is going to be very tough. Yes.
Yeah. Keith, it's
Yeah.
Eamon.
Hey, Eamon. Hey.
I can give you, I can't actually tell you who it was. I can tell you, I am aware of an insurance company that spent 7 years rewriting from Synon to pure Java and ended up having to scrap it. They went through 2 CIOs and an entire development team in doing it and ended up having to scrap the whole thing. I don't think this number has changed any in the past several years, but on a good day, it's a 5 to 7 year project to migrate an application off of the IBMI to another platform. And that's assuming a pretty good team on both sides. I know our shared history, they spent, I want to say they're coming up on 8 or 9 years from someplace you and I both know.
I see, yeah.
And it has been at best a bumpy road.
I think that's a very good point you just brought up, right? It's also, you've got one set of people, maybe your AS400 people, for want of a better word, right? And now you're going to move everything, right? To run Java on a Linux platform, let's say. It's important that the Java guys are in the brave new world and going to build this application can talk to the AS400 guys, because if you don't both speak the same technical language and you don't understand each other, your chances of success are going down considerably, right? It's not easy always to get the new cool kids who are working on all the latest buzzy technology to talk to us old guys who wrote RPG-3, right? I think you have to spend, in my experience for successful projects, for migrations, I think you have to have that team working closely together, speaking the same language and willingly working together, right? So you've also got those challenges of you're going to now throw away your AS400 at some point. So what's the incentive for those guys who've built this application and know your business backwards? You're telling them that at some point they're out of a job, right? That's not the best way to motivate your team, right?
Yeah, we are training all the people in Java now and React.js. But yeah, I agree with you, the motivation. But my biggest obstacle I see is the manpower, because we got spoiled by Synon. So one Synon person, the throughput is, to me, at least 3 to 5 Java developer is the equivalent to only one Synon person. So if we cannot staff up a lot more people, we cannot handle the business, right? So now we have about 80 developers in our group for Synon. So in order to do the same thing in Synon, we need a few hundred people, and we don't have the money. So it's hard.
Yeah,
it's a big journey, right? If you pick that, I'm going to leap, right? I'm going to go from where I am to this brave new world. It would be great to take some of your current people with you, but not all of them are going to want to go. And, you know, we also all know that not all of them have the technical ability to go, because there's one thing sitting here looking at, again, an AS400 system, right, of whatever flavor. Now you're going to move them into OO, right? The methodologies used to build an object-oriented system are not easily understood by the average AS400 programmer with 30 years under his belt, right?
I can speak from experience. It will take them probably 2 to 3 years to understand the differences. I started using Aston's Visual RPG, which was a variant of C# that used RPG syntax. And after about 3 years, I finally understood what C# was about. And I'm not the world's best C# programmer. And, you know, to take that leap, you know, and the Murphy's Law will come into here. The ones you lose will be the ones that really understand the business, the ones you don't want to lose.
Yes, for sure.
The ones that are marginal, they're the ones that'll stay around. And, you know, you're going to be rebuilding your business system, the core of your business, with, you know, the B team.
And I think that's an important point to touch on as well, right? You know, you said 3 years to get. Remember, in those 3 years of learning, your developer now has moved from writing his old RPG, COBOL, Synon. Now he's writing Java, let's say. The quality of that Java code
is not
those 3 years is not something you want to be basing your business on, right?
Yeah.
You can make a big mess of this very quickly. So that's why companies get caught in that catch-22, right? Mm-hmm. I would like to bring the people with me, but the investment in training is massive. And we all know, right? We all started, no matter what it was you started writing in, RPG-2 forever ago. Your RPG-2 skills, that first day you sat down and started writing code, were not as good as they were a couple of years later, right? We've all been back into those programs we wrote when we first started, and it's like, I don't know what the hell I was thinking there, but that is not the right way to do this, right?
That's exactly right.
That's no different, right? It's just a language. Whether you're writing it in Java or RPG, doesn't matter at all. It's just a language. You can screw it up in any one of them, right? You need to think long and hard about how to get your staff on that journey.
Yeah, to us, we all know the power of Synon. I think we all, support it big time. We know how strong, how beautiful it is. But to the people like the CIOs, they don't know and they don't care, right? All they see is the cloud. We need to deploy to IBM cloud. We need to use Azure. All they know is Java can save money, which we know is not true either.
Right.
But it's unstoppable. We got to get there. So now we have a company which convert directly from Synon into Java for us. We are doing the conversion now, but I see a lot of obstacle because when I look at the Java code, the converted Java code, it looks like the Synon generated COBOL code in Java.
Yeah, exactly. That's what you're going to get. Yes.
Yeah, it's so ugly. So I'm worrying we are going down, a point of no return path now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The cost would have been a lot less just converting to Plex and using Plex Java, but management doesn't understand the benefits. Yeah.
Right. So we customize it a lot now. We went back to the converted Java code and customize it, and the cost is so high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I came from a company that was running an IBM-based ERP system that for the last 4 years, they were able to depend on one body. And that's the body sitting in this chair right now that you see on the monitor. I retired because they had let the other 2 people go. And this was about a $300 million company that placed their entire business system in my hands for 4 years. Dangerous as all hell, but they got away with it. They now have spent, I think, the project to go to a cloud-based software as a service package. The initial cost was a 7-figure number, and that was just to get the licensing for it. And that's not all the framework on top of it, which is the polite way of saying modifications. And in the quest to get rid of a data center, no internal development, and go to the promised land of all that, to be like everybody else, again, I wish them well, but that's the danger. And I will say point blank, and knowing this recording, our guys were seduced by the flashing lights and pretty colors of a modern interface and the alleged nirvana of not having a data center, not having to deal with all that. Let somebody else do it. I wish you well.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's a common story, right? We all know these same stories, and I think, Keith, that like I said before, right? There's no magic bullet here. There's no unicorn. There's no magic way to do this, right? It's I think the old adage is very true, right? It's going to cost you time, or it's going to cost you money, or it's going to cost you both.
Yeah,
you need a lot of one of those.
Yeah, right. Agree.
Well, I think, guys, we're rapidly coming towards the end of our time.
I see Kevin had a question here too, is what kind of user interface does Plex Java generate out of the box? I mean, there is a Java client that can be used. I mean, not the web client, but a Java client that can be generated automatically. I'm sure that I think that's all we have at CM First have done so far is to generate either the Java client or use web client to generate the web version. So, Kevin, what is it that you're trying to look for in this? Or are you still there? He might have exited before. Yeah, too bad. All right, but
okay.
Yeah, so
I think we're rapidly coming to the end of the time, guys. So thank you all very much. It was great to interact. Nice to be doing these things in person again. And like I say, if you feel free, my contact details are there. Please feel free to reach out if you want to talk about any of this in more detail. Happy to help where I can, both from a Remain standpoint and from just a wider IBMI community standpoint. So thank you all for your time. Hope you enjoy the conference, and I look forward to talking to you again.